Okay, so we are at the beginning of chapter 2 of the text. Any questions on anything before we start? No? Okay, good. So the first chapter that we covered was the human mechanism, all right? So this was essentially an introduction to exactly that, the human mechanism. So we described, broadly speaking, the receipt, reaction, response mechanism by which we gain our experiences from the world. We receive stimuli through the physical body. There's a reaction within, according to the quality and the nature of the mind and the intellect. And then the physical body then responds back into the world again. So this is the way that we gain our experiences. So the idea there was to understand that all of these transactions, all three portions, as it were, of this mechanism need to be improved. The receipt of the stimuli, so the quality and the nature of the stimuli that you're experiencing, the way that we react, right? So we can talk about checking the reactions that occur, and then also monitoring the quality and the nature of the actions that we perform. So that essentially means checking to see whether we are acting in a self-centered way or an unselfish or selfless way. So this was, broadly speaking, what we covered in the first chapter. Second chapter here is called Born in Captivity. So while the first chapter was describing, broadly speaking, how we gain our experiences, this chapter starts to explain the quality of our experiences per se. So he says we are born in captivity. So let's start with the text. Any questions before we pick up? Okay, good. So the first section, captive from birth, he says, living creatures are all born literally in captivity, be they plant, animal, or human. They live through their lives in moulds of their own, with little choice to free themselves from the caste into which they are born. Thus, a banyan tree is massive and widespread, while a coconut tree is slender and tall. These trees are strong and hold themselves erect, whereas creepers are weak and need external support for their growth. Similarly, animals are fixed in their particular moulds. The carnivore cannot turn vegetarian, neither can the herbivore become flesh-eater. So too does a human being take to his own mould. At birth, the human baby is totally helpless. It has to be picked up by the mother and breastfed. The baby cannot help itself, whereas other creatures are known to fend for themselves right from birth. The pup reaches its mother's bosom to feed itself. The chick starts pecking at bits of food soon after it is hatched. But the human baby is at the mercy of its parents for a prolonged period of time. So I've heard him say in the classes that the human baby is the stupidest of all babies. in the sense that at the point of birth, it is, as he said, it's the most helpless. If the mother doesn't actually lift the child to the breast, the child will just cry and wail and then eventually die. Whereas the puppies, as he says, the puppies will at least start to pad around looking for the teat to suckle. Now, there's different physiological reasons for this, of course, but the point that he's making in this first paragraph is the idea that we're born into captivity, in the sense that the moment we're born, and he talks about all living creatures, they're born into a particular mould. And once you're in that mould, that's it. There is a restriction according to the qualities and the natures of whatever being it is you're born into. So he gives the example of animals. Once you are born as a flesh-eating animal, a carnivore, you can't choose to become a vegetarian. Right? If you spend a prolonged period of time without any prey or any game, then you might start eating leaves and grass just to fill your stomach. But you're not choosing to be a vegetarian. The moment prey comes along, bang, you go for it. That's it. That animal is cast in that mould. So in that sense, it's captive. Human beings are also captive. At different stages in their lives, they're captives in different ways. And to varying degrees. But the whole purpose of this philosophy, and especially when he talks about this text, The whole purpose of this philosophy is to achieve a sense of freedom, liberation. But you can't liberate yourself until...
Let go of attachment.
Yeah? What comes before that?
You understand that you're not free.
Yeah. You can't free yourself if you don't recognize that you are bound. So freedom is the relinquishing or the releasing or the removal, as you say, it's the removal of attachments. But you have to know what attachment is before you can remove them. So you have to be aware of your status as captive before you can strive for freedom. You know, we're aware of hunger, our body tells us, and therefore we strive for the refrigerator. And we get there, and we eat. So it's our recognition of our hunger that drives us to food. Part of the huge problem that we face is a sense of complacency, which is that even though we may be captive, bound, limited and restricted, we don't recognize it because we've become so accustomed to it. It's the old, and I don't know how true this actually is, but it's a good story nonetheless. It's that old story of you take an elephant when it's a baby, you tie a chain around its leg and put the stake in the ground. And the first thing it does, of course, is try to get away. But because it's a baby elephant, it doesn't have the strength yet, it can't. And so it learns, I'm bound. And then when it's an adult elephant, like that, it could snap the chain. But it's become so accustomed to that position that this is my life, defined by the radius of the chain. I've also heard that this is how you train jumping fleas. That you put a cap on the jar and they'll try to jump and they'll reach a certain height. And after a certain number of generations, all of the fleas know that I can jump so high and no further. Then you can take them out. You've got yourself a flea circus. They're not going to jump away because you know they're only going to jump so high and no further. Now, again, I don't know if it's true, but it's a really good story. So. And so we experience the same thing. We are in a state of limitation or captivity, but we're not aware of it. And so, how are you doing? Good? Fine? Great? Captive. Right, when someone asks you how you're doing, don't say captive. But mentally, there should be that awareness. Right, there's a limitation here. There's what can I do to get out of this limitation? And so this is the whole purpose of this text. The purpose of this text, it's called the Holocaust of Attachment. It's describing what attachment is, making us aware of the problem per se. And then once we're aware of the problem, then we can start to investigate ways to get out of it. So he says, from birth you are held a captive. To start with, as a male or a female. You could be born in a slum or in a palace, healthy or deformed. Again, as an American or an Indian, a Chinese or a Japanese, etc. You are bound by certain parameters from the very beginning. Your birth tethers you to your environment, your nationality, your race, your religion, everything around and about you. And you do not seem to realize that human beings, by and large, take to the characteristics of the environment. You are perceptibly influenced by the traits and qualities of the people around you. Their customs and manners affect your behavioral pattern. Even the climatic conditions at your place has an impact on you. The environmental pressures seem to shape your personality. You go through the span of life not realizing that you are shackled, bound by your little world. An American would be an American. So to an Indian would be an Indian, and a Chinese, a Chinese, a Japanese, a Japanese. Thus, every human being is caught up in his own enclave, lives within the precincts of a tethered life. Hardly anyone realizes that humans alone have the prerogative to break through life's shackles, bondages, and enjoy absolute independence, and that they remain unaware of this unique privilege bestowed upon the human race, much less attempt to rise above the limitation caused by birth and environment to enjoy their inherent freedom. Instead, people live in their own enclaves, indulging in petty squabbles and quarrels over inconsequential aspects of life. Okay. There's a little doom and gloom.
That's everything right there.
But it's...
It's like this whole year and a half. That's right there.
Yeah. So he says you could be born male or female, slum or palace. So this is sort of what he was talking about, same thing with the animals. You're born as a carnivore or a herbivore. That's it. Nothing you can do. You're born as a female, bang, done. That's it. You are a female. Born as a male, you're a male. There's the mold has been cast. Pour in the plaster, break the mold, there you are, bang. Slum or a palace. And then he talks about the environment, the cultural environment. Look at a map of the planet, shaded in by religion. It's curious that the religions stop right where the national borders do. So the religion that you adopt is purely a matter of geography in that regard. You're a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian, whatever, because the people around you are. And they are Christian, Muslim, Hindu, because the people around them are. So you're defined, as is what he says, you are perceptibly influenced, you adopt the characteristics of the environment. So whatever the environment is, you adopt that. Born into a socialist environment, socialism is correct. Born into a capitalist environment, capitalism is correct. So what he says is that an American will be an American, Chinese will be a Chinese. So we have a particular culture. Each society, each individual has its particular culture. What do we understand by culture?
Customs and norms.
Yep, customs and norms.
Beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Beliefs, mannerisms. Yep, so all these things are encompassed in that. One of the ways that we can describe culture is to say that when a group of people living in a sort of a geographical location over a period of time adhere to certain values consistently, then they develop a culture, a fragrance that we can call a culture. So it boils down to values and beliefs. This is what the culture is. And so an American has his or her own culture because the environment has been created through the expression of certain beliefs and values. Go to a different country, something completely different, a Pakistan or a Saudi Arabia or a China or a Russia. And there are different values that have been emphasized. Broadly speaking, there will be a lot of crossover of values, but there will be certain values that are emphasized and certain values that are very different. And so the Chinese culture is very different from the American culture. So the problem is you take an American and put him in China, and he acts like an American. Take the Chinese person and bring her to America, she acts like a Chinese person. And so this is where we get the culture clash. And the same is true even within a country. You take someone who has a religious orthodoxy and they go to another place where they're predominantly agnostics or atheists. Or vice versa. An atheist goes into a community where everyone has a religious orthodox and acts on that basis and offends everybody. So the idea is that we can't break out of our culture. He says to have that flexibility so that when you're an American, you've got your own values and way of thinking and everything else. When you go to South India, you be a South Indian. And it's not that you fake it. It's not that you stop being yourself. But what it means is that you have you lack a rigidity. You lack attachment to your own values. So you're now able to identify with the values of the people around you. And so take a very simple example, the food. Now when you're at home, breakfast is very clear. It's a nice fresh juice and it's some good cereal and a piece of fruit and whatever else. That's my. Go to South India, what is breakfast? In the hottest part of the year, idli sambar. So it's a hot spiced lentil with hot steamed rice cakes. You'd never ever eat it. And so someone serves you idli sambar. Hey, what is this? For breakfast? Ugh. No, you're rigid, you're attached to your own values. Look at the people around you. No better breakfast than this. Can you identify with that culture? Can you feel what it would be like to enjoy those idli sambar? Be a South Indian in that environment. When you go back home, you're back to yourself again. But he says we lack this ability, that freedom, because we're constrained and constricted by our own culture. People live in their own enclaves, indulging in petty squabbles and quarrels over inconsequential aspects of life. Because we feel that we're stuck. We don't even feel that we're stuck, because we are stuck in our own way of seeing things. Hardly anyone realizes that humans alone have the prerogative to break through life's shackles and enjoy absolute independence. So there's the thing to hold on to in this apparent doom and gloom. The only reason that the text talks about the bondage, that it talks about the suffering, the name of the text, the Holocaust of Attachment. The only reason it talks about this is to get us aware of the problem so that we are receptive to the solution. There's no point in highlighting a problem if you don't give a solution. It's like even when you have an argument with someone, you should not have done that. The only time you never really have the right to say it. But if you are going to say it, you have to be able to say you ought to have done this. You have to be able to highlight what they did wrong and how they could have done it correctly. As I've seen conversations that don't have that. You should not have done it. Well, what should I have done? Well, I don't know. Well, you can't say, I don't know what you should have done, but you shouldn't have done that. If you're going to complain to someone about their behaviour, you need to be able to understand where they could have gone right, in your eyes. And of course, you might be completely wrong, but that's beside the point. The point is that if you're going to criticise, there's no such thing as destructive criticism. Criticism is always constructive when it's used in that positive connotation. So this is what he's doing here. It's not that, okay, I should eat this and so you eat it. It sounds too mechanical. It's a feeling. It's a feeling of oneness. That my perspective of what I normally eat, in my culture, in my home, when I'm there, that's no longer applicable. Because I'm not in my culture, in my home. I'm somewhere else now. What is the culture here? So there's a sense of feeling, of identification with that. So what do these people eat for breakfast? Okay. Idli sambar, hot steaming, with a nice hot milky coffee. All right? Now, it doesn't mean you have to eat everything that they eat. It's not the point. It's that breaking out of your own enclave and being able to identify with another person's culture and perspective. And to be able to enjoy it. Now, it doesn't mean if you say you're a vegetarian for moral or ethical reasons, and you go to a country and what do they have for breakfast? They have goat stew. Well, I should eat the goat stew. No, you're a vegetarian, so I can't eat animals. Too much love for my animals, I can't eat them. You say that, and so you eat the bread and the whatever else. So it's not that you're forcing yourself to go against your own values. It's just that there's a feeling of oneness and identification with the people around you. And then you function however you choose to function. There's no do's or don'ts.